Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar for today, Upgrade Your Leadership Now, 9 Advanced Skills. My name is Christina Cleveland and I'm part of the team here at Canadian Management Centre, and I will be introducing our speaker for the day. But before I do so, I did want to just go over a few things with you before we start into the event. One is just to give you a brief overview of who CMC is. We do have over 1,100 people who have registered for the webinar and participating today from across the country. So we're very excited to welcome you all. For those of you who have been joining us for regular webinars, welcome back. You're likely familiar with the flow, but we'll be going through the same process today that we usually do. So to start off, I just want to bring to your attention who Canadian Management Centre is. So we are a learning and training company that is focused on providing learning and development services across the country. We are part of the AMA network, which is the American Management Association, operating in over 18 countries. So we do have access to global content and global delivery, but ultimately our mission is to build inspired partnerships that prepare the next generation of leaders to thrive in tomorrow's marketplace. So that's what leads us into our focus of bringing you up-to-date research, best practices, and insights on what's happening in our environment today, in the workplace today, and today we're going to be particularly focusing on leadership development. I do want to bring to your attention that we will have a Twitter contest on today. So for anyone who does tweet, you'll have until 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time today to tweet about today's webinar. So if there are key insights, ideas, tips, and tricks that you're picking up, feel free to tweet those using the hashtag CMC Events. You can also follow us at Canadian Management. And we are going to be entering in anybody who tweets for a chance to win a free copy of Upgrade Now, Advanced Leadership Skills, which is the book we're talking about today. So you definitely want to get your hands on a free copy of that. Please, again, feel free to tweet using the hashtag CMC Events. After the session today, within about 24 to 48 hours, you will receive a link to the recording of the session, which will give you access to be able to review the PowerPoint slides and also hear the recording. So please rest assured you'll have access to that for yourself and also to share that with any colleagues if you wish. So moving into why this topic today, for those of you who may be managers yourself or maybe senior leaders or executives in organizations or HR professionals, we're all pretty clear that the demographics of the workforce are changing and that research is showing that people aren't leaving organizations, they're leaving their leaders that they're working with. So it's very important that leaders are cultivating productive and effective relationships with their employees. And we need to collaborate to prepare for the future. And one of the things that CMC often hears from our clients is, what are the skills that are required for leaders to be effective within their role? And I personally have been following NGEN's work for many years now, and as we started into researching sort of new content for our leadership development curriculum, which we'll talk a little bit about later, I came across NGEN's new book. Giselle Kovari and Ajoa Bohane, who are the founders and managing partners within NGEN, had released this new book, which I found extremely relevant, well aligned to what we're seeing and hearing from our clients, but also well aligned to what I'm experiencing as a leader myself. So again, our commitment to bring you access to current research leads into why we wanted to get this webinar scheduled for you today. So what we'll be focusing on is introducing you to 9 leadership skills required for success based on the research that Giselle and Ajoa have been doing for their book. The other thing that I find particularly helpful is that they are doing research and consulting with organizations who are facing these challenges today. So they're speaking from practical experience and bring those relevant examples into the work that they publish. Giselle is going to be reviewing top tips for each skill area, so things that you can practically do and apply as leaders, and to sort of help you understand how to upgrade your leadership to meet the generational expectations for individuals who are in the workforce now, and also talking about those who are going to be coming into the workforce very soon, which is referencing the 5th generation that will soon come in. Depending on your industry, some of you may be having those individuals enter the workforce sooner than later. So I do want to introduce you to Giselle Kovari, who is the managing partner and co-founder of NGEN, as I mentioned. Giselle is a keynote speaker, an author, and a respected consultant that has worked globally to deliver training programs, particularly focused within leadership, but their work is definitely focused on understanding generational diversity in the workplace and how we can leverage generational differences to be the most effective as that we can be as leaders. So Giselle, I am excited to welcome you and also to pass the reins over to you so that you can get us straight into the content.
CMC and getting me ready for this session. And it's been a great partnership we've had with CMC for a number of years, so I'm very pleased to be on this call today. Thanks so much. So I wanted to give you a little bit of background on Engine before we dig deeper into what we do and how we do it. If you'd like to follow us at Engine_training, I've just recently joined the world of Twitter, so I'm learning a little bit about that. And we've dipped our toe into the world of social media. Given that it was a chapter in our book, I felt it was kind of important that I learn a little bit more about it. But we've started off slowly. So if anyone would like to follow us and learn more about what we're doing and get some of our research and information, feel free to do that. Engine is a performance consulting company, a training company, an organizational development and engagement type company. And really what we've done is expand over the last 9 years in business into a training company that has 5 practice areas: sales and customer service, leadership, team building, Gen Y, and HR. We started our work in 2003 focused around the generations and have leveraged that in all of our 5 practice areas. So the research from this book is looking at our leadership practices and ways in which we can help support our clients to have more high-performing leaders and the ways in which they can better engage their workforce. We've had the opportunity to work with a number of clients, big brands across North America, both private and public sector, and it was great looking at the attendee list for the huge number of people on the call today. There's a wide range. Many of you that we have worked with are on this call today, so it's nice to see that. And we do a blend of work with both private and public sector clients across North America and globally. We've had an opportunity to work with over 50,000 people over the last 9 years, over 175 companies. And in what we're finding in all of those organizations, regardless of industry or sector, there are some key themes and key challenges, and that's really what helped feed our desire and our research and our focus for this book, because everyone is facing the challenges around how do I become a more adaptable leader, how can I better manage the team, the people I have, how do I drive greater performance and productivity for my teams by having more engaged employees. And of course, then we layer on our generational perspective. If you have any questions at all during this presentation, I'm happy to take them, and you can certainly chat and put them in your chat box to Christina, and she'll be sure to let me know and interject at appropriate times, but look forward to getting some of your questions and comments throughout as well. Some of the things that we do as well to constantly remain current and ensuring that we are sharing our information and our research is that we're regularly quoted in national and regional media, as well as providing articles and writing reports and issuing new research. And so feel free certainly to visit our website if you'd like to look at some past articles or keep your eyes peeled for us in some of your local media or national media as we make comments around the shift in leadership and certainly the ways in which leaders today can upgrade their skills. So the structure for the book here, this is our second book. We actually wrote our first book in 2007. It's called Loyalty Unplugged, How to Get, Keep, and Grow All 4 Generations. And that came out in 2007, and that was really focused around HR, so our HR practice area. When we thought about the second book that we wanted to write, we knew that we wanted to look at leadership, and as I mentioned, we wanted to ensure that it was relevant for all of our clients, regardless of industry or sector. We wanted to ensure that these were things that all leaders were facing and that were current. And so the structure of the book is, up front discussing why do we need to upgrade our skills, or what's the business case for that. And we reference some of our research and our model around organizational engagement. That was from our first book. And then we've picked 9 skills that we think are very critical and very important, and we went out and interviewed a number of our clients to get real-world examples and include that in the book. And then we wrap that up with a discussion of what's next. So what's the future of leadership, and particularly what's going to be that 5th generation. So I will be touching on elements of all of these areas today, obviously at a high level, but want to ensure that you can walk away with some practical tips and techniques that you can apply. So the structure and the objective of the book was really to provide leaders with tools and techniques that they could use to advance the demonstration of their leadership skills and their behavior. So we wanted to ensure that it's very practical, very relevant, and very easy to use. And we're pleased with the feedback that we received from people to say, I can use this quickly. I can just reference the chapter that's relevant for me today, read a couple pages and put it down and go back to it later on. And that's how we intended it, almost like a workbook style. Each chapter of the book is structured in a way in 4 easy compartments, and that's how do you learn about the subject area, so whatever it is, and we're going to talk about those nine skill areas, but what do you need to do to learn about it? What do you need to do to apply it with some tips and techniques? What do you need to do to upgrade your leadership? And that, for us, the upgrade is layering on that generational perspective, ensuring that you can modify your leadership practices, your management practices, based on the 3 or 4 generations that you may have on your team. And then how do you execute it? And we provide a tool. So that's the structure of each chapter. Today what I'm going to do is focus around the apply and the upgrade. I'll give you a little bit of background information on what we have in each chapter around the learn, but that tends to be more the theoretical, and the execute, as I mentioned, is a practical tool. Today I'm going to focus around the apply and the upgrade. And we're going to give you an opportunity to get some information there and certainly can answer some further questions. As I mentioned, when we started the research for the book, not only did we look at academic research and scholarly research and what was current, we wanted to go to a number of our clients. So we had the great fortune to have the clients listed on the screen there who were kind enough to give us their time and their energy and be interviewed and be quoted in the book around a number of these different topic areas, sharing how they are then upgrading their skills internally and how they're supporting their leaders to do so. So we thank them very much for that contribution, and it's great because I know we have a number of these organizations represented here today on this call. So let's get started. So our first skill is creating an engaging work environment. We wanted to start the book with this because in some respects this is the broadest approach. When we think about having a great environment, we need to understand what that looks like from a leadership standpoint. And so, first and foremost, when we spoke about or we wanted to start to speak about this topic, research this topic, we said, well, what are the things that we know employees want from their work environment? Given the 50,000 people we've worked with across North America and globally, we're hearing some common themes, and they're things like collaborative leadership. Naturally, people are looking for managers who possess those strong people leadership skills, not just someone who's been promoted into that role because they were a great functional expert, but also because they truly have the ability to lead others. Employees are asking to be empowered. They're looking for strong team building, and they're looking for flexibility. And so what we do in the first section around learn is talk about the different types of work cultures, and we itemized 4 different types of cultures that may be represented in your organization, from hierarchical to market-driven to what's called a clan culture, or then an adaptable and flexible workplace culture. So we explore that. And we also talk about ways in which at a macro level and at a micro level, leaders can begin to embrace more of that adaptable, flexible work environment, because what we're finding increasingly so from our clients is that that is the best way to move forward into this new era of a multi-generational workforce that's asking for, quite frankly, a different kind of relationship with leaders. So in our apply section, we dig deep into 7 different factors that you need to do in order to build an engaging work environment. What I wanted to highlight was the top 3 for you today. And first and foremost, it's about promoting flexibility. If there's nothing else that you can do to build an engaging work environment, we would suggest you focus your energies and efforts around flexibility. That's really where you're going to get your biggest bang for your buck. And we know that from the research that employees who have even a small degree of flexibility in where they work or how they get work done have significantly higher employee satisfaction scores or engagement scores. They have stronger commitment and loyalty to their organizations, and they have lower levels of stress. So the research is there to back that up. And of course, there's a number of different options that you can use to promote flexibility. Things like flex time. So, the start and end times for a day might be flexible for employees. A compressed work week. Many people do that in summer hours, right? Shortening the time so that employees can have time off on Fridays. Reduced time, so people moving from a full-time to a part-time position based on some needs within their life. Flexible leaves are also some of the things that our clients have used where employees can access time off because of a family or personal issue. Flexible careers I thought was kind of interesting. We haven't seen a lot of that, but employees will have multiple points of entry or exit and then re-entry for their career over the lifetime of their career. So again, it may be, when we think about it as it relates to perhaps paternity leave or maternity leave, that could be seen as a flex career. People are exiting the workforce for a short period of time, then returning. You may have people on your team who have left to pursue a certain educational path and then returned. And then flex places. So where do people work, and what time are they doing that? Can they be working across the street at Starbucks? Can they be sitting at a beach getting the work done, or do they have to be in your office? And in some very traditionalist industries, so we know certainly government, banking, insurance, oil and gas, many of the industries in which we work tend to be very traditionalist. They can sometimes be reluctant to embrace flexibility. They say, well, you know what, we're not sure we really want to go there. But the market is driving it so that if they're looking to engage, in particularly younger workforce, they're being asked to do that more and more. And in working with our client Murphy Oil, they found firsthand that flexibility was really a great way to engage and leverage employees. And what they do is allow people to work a 9/80 work schedule. So it's 80 hours in 9 days within a 2-week period. And so this provides employees with opportunity to control their work schedule, and they can balance their personal priorities, and it gives people that kind of flexibility. So there's lots of ways to be able to do that. The second area that we think is most important for you to consider is building trust. You're not going to have an engaging work environment unless employees trust you as a leader. And I've seen from the registration here that we've got a number of people on the call today that are in a full range of different leadership positions. You may be a project manager or leading a team, you may be an IT manager, you may be a director, or you may be within HR supporting other managers. But critical to your relationship with those people who are part of your team is to build that trust. And of course, it's important for every relationship, but it's particularly important in a relationship where you want to empower people to deliver their best. So earning that trust is something that clearly takes time and effort, and it has to come from a genuine interest on your behalf. People can really sense if you're not genuine about the relationship you're trying to build. So a couple of tips on things that you can do to build trust. First and foremost, follow through on your promises. And if you can't meet a promise, then it's important to go back and communicate why you can't. So being very consistent with your word is also another way to ensure that people on the team, when they speak with you and speak with each other, are going to hear the same message, or that you will have been clear and consistent across the board with people. And that really leads to treating everyone with fairness. If there's a perception of favoritism, that is one of the fastest ways to erode trust. And then, of course, leading by example. So if you would like others to trust you, then you need to trust your team members. And it's a bit of a chicken or egg sometimes, but we really encourage leaders to be the first person to extend the olive branch and say, you're going to trust your team members and your employees to act and behave in the right way, and I think in return you're likely to receive that trust. And one of the other things that you can do is ask employees what behaviors they would like you to demonstrate to build on their trust or to avoid eroding it. And the great thing is that when you solicit that feedback, you're likely to get some very specific comments and content. So when you think about how do you then upgrade your leadership to take into account that you have a multi-generational workforce. Oh, and I just realized I skipped one, didn't I? Integrating fun. How could I do that? That's the most fun. Have fun at work is one of the other things that you want to do in order to create an engaging work environment before I talk about how to upgrade. We've heard about it time and time again. Companies like Google or Zappos are talking about how they've created fun within their work environment. And fundamentally what organizations have done is that they've integrated fun within their day. And so when we interviewed Best Buy Canada, they said, well, yeah, absolutely. We want to create a fun environment for people. It's part of creating an engaging work environment. And we do this in a number of different ways. So they have like an on-site gym, which makes the day fun as if you can break it up with some exercise and you don't need to travel far to do that. They have subsidized dining area. So not only is it, great that you can collaborate with each other over a meal, but you've been able to remove some of the barriers. So that's not necessarily fun, but it creates an environment that's enticing, and therefore you're not focused on some of the, some of the mundane things that you need to do, like get to the gym or make sure you have a healthy lunch. So when that's taken care of, then you also free up time for creativity and innovation and for fun. And what we know is that organizations in the research that have highlighted that they have a more fun work environment, they have increased retention of employees, increased profitability, and again, they have reduction in stress and anxiety and boredom. Now, a lot of times organizations and clients will say, well, you know what, our work isn't really all that sexy maybe, or the work environment's not all that, appealing to everybody, so how are we going to make it fun? And there's lots of ways that you can spark fun within your work environment. I thought this was kind of a funny maybe, slightly cheesy approach, but it probably works really well, which was, just celebrating each other with a standing ovation. They said if someone's done something great, celebrate it on the spot. All of a sudden have colleagues to give them a standing ovation. Being spontaneous by interrupting the work with a fun activity. So, you know what, hey guys, we're all going to go outside and play Frisbee for the next 20 minutes, or the ice cream truck's just showing up in the, the summer afternoon, or we're going to take off early and go do something. Really encouraging humor and laughter is one of the things that our clients have said has been important, is not having an environment that's so stuffy that they can't just make jokes. And also not having leaders control what is quote-unquote fun, right? They say, well, now is time for fun. It's not like that. It's a fluid thing, and it's really about having employees decide what they want to do. So it's not controlling that or making rules, but it's expanding what it means to have fun at work and allowing, individual teams or employees to do that. So I think it's freeing up that space and that mindset that work can be fun, that the workplace can be fun, that going to work can be a fun activity. At the same time, we are also delivering results. We're also meeting our business objectives. We're also servicing our clients and our customers. So now to the upgrade. Well, how do the different generations view this? What we know increasingly so is that your Gen Ys are going to expect an open and collaborative culture. So if you're looking to have, again, an engaging work environment for your Gen Ys, have to have a management leadership style that's collaborative and is seeking a win-win relationship with them. They're not going to respond, well to an environment where they haven't had the opportunity to discuss and share their ideas. And that's partially because Gen Ys have been born and raised in an environment where their opinion has been solicited, listened to, and acted upon since they could speak. Right? They've been asked since they were 2 years old their opinion and their thoughts. So that lends itself to a collaborative environment. So they don't respond well to one that's overly hierarchical. And even in very hierarchical type organizations where we've worked, police forces or defense, they're looking for ways to encourage their managers to be more collaborative in their management style. And I don't think that's going to go away. I mean, that goes a long way to engaging everyone, both your Gen Xers, your baby boomers, and your traditionalists. And recognizing that the multi-generational workforce does have all 4 of those: traditionalists, baby boomers, Gen Xers, and Gen Ys. And so again, in our book, we frame each topic area as it relates to all 4. Creating opportunities to have a work-life balance is critical, and again, it's important for everyone, but it's particularly important from a motivation standpoint for your Gen Xers. This doesn't mean that Gen Xers don't work hard or put in long hours, because clearly they do. But the reality is for them is they want to ensure that they have a work-life balance because they place a lot of emphasis on things that are outside of work. They place equal emphasis or just as much importance on things outside of their work. And your Gen Ys are looking for that meaningfulness of work. Their goal is to find work and create a life that has meaning. So they want to ensure that they're working in organizations and they're working on projects and tasks that are meaningful to them. So you need to make that connection for the big picture around what they're doing and the impact it has on your organizational success. If your Gen Y can't see that, then it's very hard for them to be engaged in the work environment. They may do the work and they may complete the tasks or the job, but they may not really have their heart and soul invested in it. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about creating a work environment. How can you ensure that based on the team and the demographics of the team that report to you, what are the things that you can do to ensure that it aligns to their values, their expectations, and their behaviors? So now let's talk about our second area, which is facilitating employees' career development. And this is an interesting topic area because what we find is the notion of career or the term career is thrown around a lot by leaders, but we're not always talking about the same thing. And when someone says, well, you know what, they really, they need to do this to have a good career, or that was a, career buster, or this is how their career should progress, we're making the assumption that everyone defines the concept of career in the same way, and that's just fundamentally not the case. So what we do in the Learn section is explore from a theoretical standpoint a number of different career paths, and there's actually 4 different ones. The linear career path, the expert career path, the spiral career path, or the transitory career path. And then we look at different employee career patterns, because fundamentally within those paths, there might be 3 or 4 different types of patterns, and the 3 primary patterns are a specialist, a generalist, or an entrepreneur. So at a high level here, a specialist is really about a strict adherence to a particular occupational field or industry, and it tends to have very specialized education or knowledge and skills. And that path is very predictable, and it tends to be vertical in nature. Whereas a generalist pattern of their career usually includes a number of back and forth horizontal moves within an organization, and it's for someone that has usually a larger foundation of expertise, and they're really great at having networking opportunities across the organization. And then, not surprising, an entrepreneurial pattern is one where there's frequent career moves. There's a high degree of mobility for someone who likes that career path. There's not a lot of adherence to formality, and there would be a high degree of expertise, but over a large range of different interests. So we look at all of those in more detail. So when we think about how do you facilitate someone's career development, one of the tips that you can apply is first and foremost explore the possibility of your employees' career motivations in relation to your organization's structure and career path. Because it's important to know if someone has a desire for an entrepreneurial career pattern and you don't have an environment that supports that, then it'll be important to have that conversation around what can you do to assist that person in being entrepreneurial within their role, or what are the things that you can do. So you want to discuss the specialist, the generalist, or the entrepreneurial career pattern, and then collaboratively explore their goals and figure out what's likely to happen. And in addition to that, you want to make sure that you're having a conversation about the barriers that they might face if that's not an opportunity for your organization to change your structure. So what are the barriers, and then what are the things that you can do as a leader to help them overcome those barriers? And you want to continue to develop their skills within their role as much as possible. Now, in some cases, it may be that they have a very different view of their career that might not align with your organization, and at some point they may need to leave the organization, and that's okay too. One of the other things you can do is identify the skills that employees want to develop, but be very clear with them around, is this the short or medium term or long term? So having that conversation, understanding what their skills are, and making sure that you're on the same page is how they define short, medium, and long term. Again, from a generational perspective, short term for a Gen Y is probably 2 to 3 weeks. Maybe, for Gen X or 2 to 3 months. I had a leader once who said to me, we've got great things planned for your career, Giselle. I said, fantastic. I was super excited. And she says, in the next 3 to 4 years. Well, for me, that wasn't 3 to 4 years wasn't considered short term. I was expecting in the next quarter. So you need to be aligned there and making sure that you have clarity, and then make plans to help employees develop those skills through, mentoring, coaching, training, job shadowing, all the other ways in which you can support them. And then the third area is plan their career development conversations with all employees. So ensure that as a leader, you are actually conducting these types of career conversations with all employees, not just your high performers. And this is different, by the way, than performance management, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But career development conversations are very different than performance management, and often managers will confuse those. They said, well, yeah, I talked to them about how they need to improve. No, that's different. A career conversation is, where do you want your career to go? What are the skills you want to learn? What kind of pattern are you looking for, and how can I help support you? So having these career development conversations with employees at all levels is critical, because it's important that everyone know that you're there to be a career collaborator with them, and that you're not just categorizing the high potential people as those that deserve your attention and your effort, but that you're looking, for a wide range of, an understanding of a wide range of people's desires, and not just focusing, again, on some of your high posts. Now, those of you that are in your mid-performer level, it's actually a very important conversation to have, because you may find that they have a desire to learn something or move into a different part of the business or a different area within your department than you've ever explored before. And that might not naturally come up in their performance review. So it's a great opportunity for you to share and learn about that. And you can increase engagement levels of those moderately engaged employees by not just focusing on the specific career move that they're going to take, but on the skills and the competencies and things that they want to learn. So taking that shift to making it employee-focused versus organization or leader-focused. And I think there might be a question here. It says, do you think that we as older workers, quote unquote, don't want the same thing? This feels very one-sided. Are you going to address what we as leaders should be able to expect in return? So if the question is as it relates to do you want the same thing from a, I think perhaps you're referencing the first chapter from a work environment standpoint, absolutely. You know, again, what we know from our research and our work around a multi-generational workforce is that the 4 generations don't have different values. But what they have is a different way of expressing their values and expectations in the work environment. And that some are more aligned to existing structures than others. And so absolutely everyone's looking for an engaging work environment. Again, we talk about that in the book. All 4 generations are looking for meaningfulness. All 4 generations are looking for an opportunity to learn, to grow, to have fun. What we often find from our clients is that they're very clear on how to align to their traditionalist and baby boomer needs. And that's partially because there's 9.6 million baby boomers, and they tend to represent the bulk within most organizational structures, and often at the senior leadership level. And or the organizations have been very much aligned to traditionalist values and expectations. So those tend to work really well. Where our clients struggle is how then do I create an engaging work environment when I've begun to integrate Gen Xers and Gen Ys into that? And today Gen Xers are in leadership positions, clearly. I'm sure many of you on the call today are Gen Xers. So it is about ensuring that you understand that, and then what is the win-win for both for you as a leader and for your employees. And part of that is having a conversation. And what I didn't do at the upfront is, you know, explore sort of our model of organizational engagement that is discussed at the intro of the book. But just as a quick overview, we discuss how do you create engagement with employees, and it's about being a transparent, responsive, and partnering leader. That's really the model from our first book, Loyalty Unplugged. So taking that approach will allow you to have the conversations around what is a win-win outcome, so that you're clear around what you're getting out of this and what other folks, what your employees are going to be able to provide to you. So absolutely, great question. So continue on here, some of the things around career development. There may be a reluctance to share career expectations by some more experienced employees, and that's partially because in an era where traditionalists were not often asked what they wanted to do in their career, they were told, they may not be as willing to open up and share. So that's one of the things you want to create an environment for people to have a conversation around that, so your experienced employees can feel comfortable. You may be surprised with the candid feedback that you receive from younger employees. They're probably not going to have a problem sharing with you what they want to do with their career. We have a lot of managers who've said, Gen Ys have said, yeah, I pretty much want your job, so when are you leaving? Or, you know, yeah, this is going to be my career move, and by the way, I don't plan on being in this organization in the next 3 years. Sometimes managers are taken aback by that. But their candid feedback is actually a real strength because it allows you to understand what their goals are and then figure out ways in which you can work together to achieve those, particularly if you want to keep them in the organization longer. You also need to be able to give a clear picture as to what paths are or not possible. Again, if someone has a desire for a very specific career path and that doesn't look like it's going to happen in your organization, it's best to be open and honest and forthcoming about that up front. So now, performance management, as I mentioned, this is different than having a career development conversation. And when we think about performance management, you know, there's a lot of research there that supports why it's important. In the book, what we explore are some of the benefits to leaders of having a strong performance management process, and then we look at ways in which they can do that. So I'm curious, does your organization struggle with how to effectively manage employee performance? If you could answer the poll question, that would be helpful, because we are finding that there's a hot topic there.
So Giselle, we've got the poll open on the right-hand side of the screen, so participants can start to submit their responses. And I know that we've got a lot to go through within the time that we have left, but one of the questions that came in as you were talking about facilitating employees' career development is what should we be doing about baby boomers who may be retiring soon? There's not really a perceived opportunity to develop their careers if they're sort of thinking about heading out.
That's a great question, and actually just finished writing a newsletter talking about some of the data that's come out from PricewaterhouseCoopers as it relates to that specifically, and what we're finding, what their research has found most recently is that, you know, baby boomers did leave the organization. They were eligible for retirement, and they did leave during the recession, or they were let go. So there's fewer number of people in the organization that are even within that baby boomer cohort. But for those people that are nearing retirement, we believe it's still important to have a conversation around how to develop their skills. Just because someone's going to retire doesn't mean they don't want to continue to learn and to grow. So still look at the ways in which they can do that. Plus, there may be an opportunity, or there may be a need, quite frankly, in your business to retain that person after retirement, to have them come back as a coach or as a mentor on special projects. So not focusing on their career goals, can be quite short-sighted, recognizing that their career in the organization might only be another year or two. But people always want to continue to learn and grow, and with the repeal of mandatory retirement, they may choose to stay longer. So let's just see, do I get the results here?
Yep, I think the results are just, we're just closing out the poll, so the results will be displayed momentarily.
Oh, okay, great. Fantastic.
So it looks like, based on what we're seeing, about 57% of those who responded are saying somewhat, and the other 31% is absolutely that they're struggling.
Okay. And yeah, I think that's, again, that's quite common. We see this a lot. This tends to be a very hot topic. People are saying we have a performance management process, but maybe it's not implemented effectively or consistently across the organization, or we just, we have one, but it's not working well. So some of the tips for you as a leader specifically, recognizing you're not going to be able to change the whole performance management process perhaps within your organization, or what are some of the things you can do. First and foremost is understanding what are the 4 different types of goals within performance management and in the planning stages. So, there are job goals, which is directly related to a job or a task that someone might do. There's project goals, again, related to the project or but it's above and beyond a routine task. There's professional development goals, and that would align with what we just talked about, related to the learning development that's going to need to take place. And then there's performance improvement goals. And these are the behaviors and actions that must be met when poor performance exists. So understanding that when you are having a conversation with an employee around their performance management is very important. Are you talking about a job goal, a project goal, a professional development goal, or performance improvement goal? We tend to focus heavily in performance management around those high performers or those low performers, but again, it's important that we focus around that mid-employee and what are the things that they can do to improve. Secondly, you want to focus your efforts on coaching versus mentoring. And coaching is going to be specific to what can you do to help support them. So some of the things that you can do there, again, are exploring issues versus telling the employee what the issue is. You want to have a conversation and allow them to explore the way in which they need to improve. You also want to facilitate employees' reflection around what they've been doing and how they've been doing it. This is important that there's some self-reflective component included in the performance management conversation so that it's not entirely one-sided. It's not you as a leader saying this is how performance needs to improve. It's also the employee recognizing, and lots of your programs incorporate those already. And you want to focus on the long-term improvement instead of just the immediate needs. Yes, there may be something they need to do today to improve, but how is that going to improve the long-term success of their performance and the contribution to the team, to the organization? You also want to ensure that there's no surprises. Consistently in the research, that's the #1 thing. If you're conducting performance management conversations, there cannot be a surprise at the end of the year, end of the quarter, or biannually when you have your conversation. Throughout, there should be these informal touch points with employees around their performance. Yeah, you're doing a great job, you're on track, or you know what, here is an area for improvement and you need to start to focus on that immediately. And that's particularly important when we think about a generational perspective. For traditionalists and a traditionalist type organization, there tended to be very infrequent conversations around performance, and if there was any conversation at all, it was informal. It's like, hey, Bob, you're doing a great job, pat on the back. And baby boomers came into organizations with 9.6 million people. They had to compete heavily with each other. So where they were focused on adding their value and putting their stamp on things and in a competitive marketplace differentiating themselves. So they tend to be uncomfortable if they receive a lot of negative feedback because that could be strike against them within an organization. So they have been exposed to predominantly a sandwich model of feedback, which means it was positive, 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 negative, positive, positive, positive. That negative was sandwiched amongst a lot of positive comments. And we're actually hearing more and more from our clients that Gen Ys have a desire for that model as well. Gen Xers like to go right to that meat of the negative, so to speak. They say, what is the area of improvement? Tell me how I can improve, and what are the results? And that's because Gen Xers' goals are to gain marketable skills and results they can put on their resume. So they don't want to talk about the things they've done great. They want to dig deep into what was I doing well and how could I improve that for next month, next quarter, next year. Gen Ys overall haven't been accustomed to receiving a lot of negative feedback, and there's lots of reasons why. A school system that's been focused on building self-esteem and a home life that's been focused on ensuring positive reinforcement. This is not a bad thing, but it often doesn't reflect our work world. And so what happens is we have lots of managers who've said, I thought I gave very balanced feedback to my Gen Y around their performance, and they left my office in tears. And so they've played on soccer teams and hockey teams and baseball teams where everyone's received a trophy all the time. So hearing that they're not, completely 100% performing can be a bit of a shock to the system. So it's important for you as a leader that when you are having performance management conversations with Gen Ys that you understand clearly ways in which you can gauge them, and we do discuss that a little bit more in the book. So how do we engage employees then? Through recognition, and recognition being a key element and a key driver. In the book, we look at the research as it relates to intrinsic versus extrinsic rewards. So extrinsic being those carrots that are sort of dangled in front of employees to spur them on for greater performance. And the intrinsic, the theory around intrinsic rewards is what truly motivates someone around why they want to work, the motivators. And the research suggests there that, intrinsic rewards are very powerful in driving performance, particularly in a knowledge-based work environment. And so there's things like the need for autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So what's important for you to do once you have a good understanding of the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic is evaluate your organization's recognition program. Is it all about the carrots? If it is, then that's important for you to know. If you do focus a lot around providing intrinsic motivation to employees, then how do you tie that together with something that's perhaps external? Because the best approach is one that's a combination of the two. So you want to evaluate your organization and figure out, what's being done and how can you supplement your program to encompass both of those theories. The second thing is solicit employees around how they'd like to be rewarded. I mean, that sounds like a simple thing, but in reality, sometimes we forget to do that. We create these great programs and we roll them out and we're surprised that people aren't, doing backflips or excited. These rewards could be free. They might have very little cost or association, but they can drive great performance. In particular, you may have employees that want to focus around giving back in the community. Well, a reward could be time off for them to do volunteer work. You may find that someone has a real passion around something. Well, how do you support them in that, either through time and or through a financial contribution to do so? And you also want to invite employees to participate in recognition at all levels. So it's important to encourage all team members to recognize each other for work that's really been well done. That includes you as a leader. So it's not just about you as a manager and leader recognizing people who are on your team, but how can they also recognize you? And employees are quite quick to be able to encourage and reward each other, clearly, and there's lots of organizations that have great programs. I'm sure you have many of those within your teams as well. But continue to do that on an ongoing basis. We hear time and time again that as things tighten up in austerity measures, as we go through tough economic times, the first thing that gets cut is any kind of recognition. And in fact, that's the place where we want to emphasize, because we're asking people to do more with less and to be higher performing. So we need to encourage recognition and rewarding across the board for everyone, and not always just with dollars. From a generational perspective, traditionalists were accustomed to a length of service rewards. And that was important for them because they were proud that they'd stayed in an organization for a long time. As baby boomers entered the work environment, that shifted to much more public recognition. Remember that competitiveness I mentioned. They want to make sure that they can be recognized by senior leaders. Your Gen Xers fundamentally believe that recognition should be embedded in everything they do. They're one of the first generations to just expect that they will be recognized for their work and rewarded. And they believe that if they're not being recognized and rewarded for their work, then there's no reason to strive forward. So it's very much a driver for their performance. And Gen Ys, as I have highlighted, they've come from a world in which they've had a lot of praise and recognition. So for them, it's constant, but it's also team-based. They've grown up in an era where there is no I in team, is the mantra. So they work very collaboratively in teams and therefore expect the team to be rewarded, not just the individual. So how do we empower employees? Through delegation. That's also a challenge that many leaders face. What we do in the book is talk about, first and foremost, what does it mean to delegate, and we define what that is and the act of empowerment. And it's really about increasing employees' accountability. It's supporting employees to make decisions, and it's allowing employees to be self-directed. So what we discuss in the book are some of the principles to effective delegation and objections, because we hear a lot of objections. So things like it takes too much time, or I could just do it better myself and do it faster, or I don't have anyone to delegate to. So we discuss those, and then we provide some responses or some benefits for how to overcome those. So the best way for you to start to delegate is understand your own comfort level with it. Do you have a lot of these objections, or do you encounter many of these objections? And if so, how can you overcome them? So how often do you delegate, or don't you delegate, or why don't you delegate? So do some self-analysis there. And until you really understand your own inclination, it's tough to move forward in that area. The second is building on employees' responsibilities over time. So it's not throwing people into the deep end necessarily, but it's assigning something up front that has a high likelihood of success and that there's a limited risk, and then over time increasing the responsibility level to greater decision making and to things that perhaps are a little bit riskier. But as your employees become more comfortable with that, as you become more comfortable and they understand the thinking that you're bringing to this and the approach, they're going to step up as well. So it's a transitional period. It's not something that can be achieved overnight, but it is something that needs to be built longer term. And when you do that, not only are you empowering the employee, but quite frankly, you're freeing up your time to be a more effective leader and focusing some of the other things. It's removing some of the day-to-day tasks that you might have on your plate, because clearly we know the leaders and managers today are all overwhelmed because you are working managers. You don't just have the luxury of leading your people, you also need to get tasks and work done. And then finally, for effective delegation, is you need to kind of just leave employees alone. You need to let them go do it. So it's giving employees that freedom and that space and the time to complete their tasks independently. You may be status updates clearly, a touch point basis, but it's getting out of their way, getting out of their hair, and it's not micromanaging that process or second guessing what they're doing. If you do that, then you're going to erode the ability to empower them. It's just going to demonstrate again that there's a lack of trust. So it goes back to what we've talked about at the beginning of building a trusting environment. What does it look like from a generational perspective? Well, the reality is that from a workplace culture standpoint, for traditionalists in many cases, delegation was discouraged, and it was discouraged because there was an expectation that leaders would have control over all matters in their team, and that they were the ultimate decision maker. So we have a number of managers that say, I struggle with delegation because I'm worried that if somebody messes up, I'm going to be held accountable, and I'd rather not that happen. Same thing a little bit from a baby boomer standpoint, but with one of our clients, Shoppers Drug Mart, that's profiled in the book, they talk about the fact that baby boomers sometimes struggled with relinquishing that control for delegation because of that historical work experience they had. And they were hesitant to delegate because they worried about that reputation that was tied to it. Gen Xers often avoid micromanaging their teams, but sometimes that's to a fault. So you can go too far in delegation. And if you don't provide enough direction or support, then people flounder and they don't know how to succeed. So Gen Xers often need some work around how can we set people up for success and provide them with the right tools and the right coaching to be successful. And Gen Ys, from a leadership standpoint, they're between 12 and 31, so clearly your oldest part of that cohort are now moving into leadership positions. What we're finding is that they strongly desire an empowered work environment. Shoppers Drug Mart found that clearly. That's one of the things they're looking for. But that the Gen Ys may in fact not delegate tasks to people on their team that they think others might not want to do. So if they think that it's not going to be something that the other employees are excited about or that their direct reports are excited about, they may not actually delegate it. So they may need some help and some coaching in that. So recognizing that delegating on a whole is something that we all have to work out as leaders, and it's not necessarily something that comes naturally to us, but with the right direction support and from our senior leaders, then we can create an environment that empowers our team members more, ultimately driving better engagement and performance. Our sixth area is leading virtual teams. More and more, our clients are working virtual teams, so what we talk about in the book is, what are virtual teams and what are some of the advantages and the barriers to that. And we also discussed 3 areas that high-performing virtual teams focus on, and that is process, people, and performance. And so we discussed that in detail. So some of the tips for you, and I've got another question here. Do you think that your organization effectively manages virtual teams? So there's a poll question. It's going to come up here. You can go ahead and answer that now. That would be great. Does your organization effectively manage virtual teams? And I'll go back to that when the results come up.
So the poll's just running right now. Responses are definitely coming in, and I think this is an interesting opportunity to also link back to what you mentioned earlier, Giselle, which is that, if we want to promote flexibility in the workforce, part of that could also be that we are giving people the opportunity to work from home, and then they're working remotely. So then what are you doing when people are outside of the office? So I'll be interested to see the feedback on that. The poll should close out in about 10 seconds.
Absolutely. So when we think about some of the tips, I'll continue on, Christine, until those results come in, and please feel free to interject. What we know is that there's some very specific leadership behaviors that can be done to effectively lead virtual teams, and they fall into here we see the results. So absolutely is only 8%, somewhat is 61%, and not at all is 31%. Again, we're having the bulk within the middle, somewhat effective in leading virtual teams. And I suspect that somewhat has to do with, yes, we've got virtual teams and we're working globally or we're working remotely, but we may not be working as efficiently or as effectively as we could. And there tends to be a breakdown in communication is what we hear from our clients. So if you need to focus somewhere as a leader, it's establishing that ongoing dialogue, using a range of mediums to stay connected with your folks and across time zones, across geographic areas, across functional areas. Also need to focus heavily around coaching. And coaching is assessing the performance and providing the learning support required for success. And that's much more difficult to do if you are not physically located where your team members are. Or if you're managing people that are, globally, how do you assess that performance? Yes, it's the quality of their work and the things that they're accomplishing, but there's some other soft skills that sometimes need to be measured. And so things that you can do are engaging others or 360-degree feedback and things of that nature to ensure that you have a full picture around their performance, and then providing them with hands-on coaching. And that might be, instant messaging that you have with them, weekly conference calls, whatever that may be. And then the other area that we know is critical is caring. And again, it goes back to that element of trust or that genuine notion that you want to build a relationship. But caring is building a personal relationship with team members and fostering collaboration that's outside of just the day-to-day work. Because virtual teams have a tough time bonding together, it's important that you as the leader care about each individual in that team as a person, not just as a team member who's producing a result. And that is what's going to help strive to build people's collaboration skills and connectivity. Because what we know is that if we are remotely away from each other, we're not physically located with each other, it's much more difficult to build a personal relationship. So we need to spend time and energy and effort doing that. We need to, from a management standpoint, start to adjust our approach around a focus on Facetime versus results. And, organizations have been talking about this for the last 10 years. We're results-based or competency-based focused organization. But the reality is that lots of managers say, if I can't see you, you're not working. So what happens when we have a virtual team? Well, we need to focus on achieving results, but that shift sometimes is difficult for some managers, and it's important that we support them in making that transition and giving them the training to help them understand how to effectively lead virtual teams if they've always had their teams physically located with them. What we know is that all 4 generations need opportunity to build relationships and social connections. Your baby boomers want to do that because they want to ensure that they're well positioned in that team. Traditionalists want to make sure that they're doing that so they can make sure that they are communicating that they're actually, not slacking off and doing their job. Your Gen Xers want to do that because for them it's important that they know who's on the team, who can help them deliver their results, and your Gen Ys are just hyper collaborative. So what we know, for example, with our client Chevron, they found that younger employees were much more easily able to adapt to the virtual teams that they created and that they desire this type of work environment, so that they've used them as the champions first around getting virtual teams up and running or being as effective as possible. younger employees in particular are quick to adapt, especially as well your Gen Ys, because they've lived in a world where they've been gaming with people around the world, or they've been on online discussion groups. So this notion that we're not physically together is okay, but they may initially struggle with working independently. So as a leader, if you've got a lot of Gen Ys on a virtual team, you need to make sure that there's an opportunity for a lot of connection. Otherwise, there can be disengagement. The great thing is there's many tools, and clearly our client Cisco has a number of them, a number of technical tools that are available now that, through Skype and through WebEx and a number of different ways, we can simulate being together in a really strong way. So how do we manage experienced employees? That's also another area. We increasingly have managers today that are younger in age than the people who report to them. So what we talk about in this chapter is the fact that there are actually 5 fundamental differences between the generations and their work styles. The second is communication. The third is risk tolerance. The fourth is respect. And the fifth is time. So in that learn component of that chapter, we discuss those in detail. When I think about some of the tips, it's important that you acknowledge any personal judgments you might make, because the reality is that we all make assessments and judgments. And once you've identified any value judgments that you might hold, then you can have a conversation with people who report to you and employees around what's important to you and actively listen. So your value judgment, for example, around risk tolerance is important to consider. If you are a leader who wants to take risks or have people take risks, you need to communicate that. You may be making a judgment about people who don't. You need to recognize the contributions of your experienced employees. How have they been contributing? And you need to provide the learning support for people as we go through change in particular. From a generational perspective, judgments occur on both sides. So ageism is actually occurring on both sides. More experienced employees will say, well, younger people don't have the experience. The flip side is younger employees might say, well, you know what, you have the experience, but I have something that's more current, the knowledge, or I'm more up to date on the latest technology. So we need to be aware of that. We have to respect everyone's experience, and we also need to recognize the difference between experience and education. And many workplaces today are shifting from one in which people are joining the organization with a high level of education, but they may not have the same experience as people on their team. And how do we create a respectful environment for both of those and establish that respect and trust for all team members? Leading and managing change. Well, from a leading and managing change standpoint in the chapter, we discuss what that model looks like and the fact that there's a very complex change management process. So we speak about that, and we write about the different types of change, the obstacles to change, and some of our reactions to change. From a tip standpoint, some of the things that you can do for those who are leading change is you need to be able to engage and communicate. First and foremost, engage those senior leaders, because if you don't have senior leadership support, then you won't be able to implement a change. And you need to clearly communicate to all levels and all stakeholders around what change is happening and why is it happening. You need to manage well, which is assuming responsibility for the ownership of the implementation of any change or the component of the change that you own, and not necessarily relying on other people to do that, as well as anchoring the change within your organizational or department or team culture. That's part of the management process. And finally, in supporting people through change, you need to be able to listen without judgment. You need to have them an opportunity for them to express their concerns. You need to solicit opinions and ideas on how to be effective, and you need to walk the talk.
So Giselle, I know we've got to go into the upgrade section for the skill, and we've got one more to cover. So for those of you on the line, we are aware we're running a little over time. So if you can stay on the line for a few extra minutes, we will cover that content. If for some reason you can't, you will be receiving a recording of the session within 24 to 48 hours, so you will get access to whatever you may have missed today.
Yes, I apologize. I have been a little bit longer than I expected. So. But I'll wrap this up really quickly for those of you, and respect your time that you need to get off this call, perhaps, if you'd like to stay for a couple more minutes. So just in this last area around change, it's recognizing that traditionalists have a different view than baby boomers, Gen Xers, and Gen Ys around change. And on one end of the spectrum is a traditionalist type organization doesn't like change because they kind of say if it ain't broke, don't fix it. all the way to the other end of the spectrum where Gen Ys, those we work with in our focus groups, say they desire ongoing change all the time. And in that world, you don't aspire to the old. You always want the upgrade. You always want it new. You always want it faster and better. So we need to recognize that from a change standpoint. And when you're leading and managing change, where might people fall on that continuum? So the last area is leveraging social media. And what we know and what we talk about in the book is the fact that there are a number of different approaches to social media, and some people are banning it, some people are embracing it. You know, some organizations are putting a lot of limits on it. But first and foremost for you, the leaders, understand what your organization's approach is. You know, are you taking one or another, and do you understand what your role is in supporting them? Also, you need to improve team collaboration and communication by leveraging these social media tools. And so what we discuss in the book are some of the things that you can do to create a more collaborative environment by leveraging some of the latest technology. And if it's possible and you're in a capacity to do so, then look at building a social media policy or working with your partners in HR to build one. And what we talk about in the book are all of the different elements that are required in building a social media policy, and fundamentally just empowering employees to understand what your perspective is and what's acceptable or not acceptable on social media. So from a generational perspective, the reality is that everyone's using social media. This isn't just something that Gen Ys use. We did a study a couple of years ago, and we know that traditionals and baby boomers are using it heavily as well. But the difference between baby boomers and Gen Xers might be on how often they use it and why they use it in a workplace. And some of the data shows that, you know, while Gen Ys are happy to just chat live, baby boomers still want meetings. So you need to understand that if you're using too much social media, it's not going to necessarily engage your baby boomers. And that we have made a shift in our organizations away from a perception of knowledge is power. And so fundamentally what social media is doing for our organizations is shaking things up and saying, you know, just because you have information doesn't mean you're powerful. It means what you're going to do with that information makes you powerful. And social media challenges us to share information freely, and perhaps more freely than we ever had before. But we need to put into context around employees how to do that successfully and efficiently. So that's the end of the 9 chapters. And again, our last chapter of our book just looks at that next generation and who they will be. And for those of you in retail that you're going to be hiring in the next couple of years. And so we discuss in the book this next generation. We've called it the global generation, those born after 2001. And we highlight in the book some of the characteristics that we can anticipate from this generation. Though recognizing they're between 0 and 11 today, we still need to watch and measure and track their characteristics and the skills that they might bring to the organization. We also wrap up the book with the future of leadership and some 6 competencies where we think leaders need to continue to focus on moving forward. And we discuss those, and you can look forward to us doing some more research in the coming months and years around these areas and helping leaders be more successful moving forward. So thank you very much. I'll hand it back to you, Christina. I recognize I'm about 3 minutes over time, so my apologies for that.
Thanks so much, Giselle. We've had amazing chatter going on Twitter and a lot of great questions coming in. So again, we are going to send out a recording for the session. One of the questions that came up, Giselle, that I just want to make sure we address is just defining the age groups for all 4 cohorts. If you wouldn't mind just kind of reviewing traditionalist, baby boomer, Gen X, and Gen Y.
Absolutely. Sorry, yes, I probably should have done that up front. So traditionalists are born between 1922 and 1945. Baby boomers are between 1946 and 1964. Gen Xers are between 1965 and 1980. And Gen Ys are between 1981 and 2000. And as I mentioned, that 5th generation then will be from 2001 going forward. So most organizations have only about 1 to 3 percentage points of their organization traditionalists. Many of them retired already, but they still represent, as I mentioned, many organizational structures or industries.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Giselle. So what you're seeing up on the screen now is just reference to CMC's leadership program, Go Beyond, which actually does link in and connect to developing some of the skills that we talked about today. So for more information, you can visit our website. We've definitely had a lot of questions coming in and comments on Twitter. So again, just a reminder, you have until 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time today to tweet using the hashtag CMC events to be entered in for a free copy of Upgrade Now. but we've gotten a lot of questions about where you can purchase the book. So here are the details about their previous book, Loyalty Unplugged, that Giselle referenced, and also Upgrade Now. And Giselle, we had a question about whether or not it's possible to purchase the book Upgrade Now in person, or are the majority of purchases online?
It's online, yep, so you can get it from our website. It's also available on Amazon. If you go to our website, though, you do have an option to purchase both a print copy or an e-version if you want it for an e-reader.
Okay, perfect. And it's only available in English right now, correct?
That's right. Only currently available in English.
Perfect. So again, we just want to thank you, Giselle, for your time today. We've gotten a lot of great feedback as we've gone through the session, a lot of great practical tips that you presented. So thank you so much for providing some real strategies on how to deal with developing some of these skills and building our leadership capability. We do want to ask participants for feedback, so please complete our webinar survey. When you shut down today, you will have access to complete that and provide us with your thoughts on today's session, and also give us any comments or feedback on sessions you'd like to see in the future. And then we do have some upcoming webinars, so you do have the option of being able to register on our website for our upcoming sessions. We do have one coming in September and then another one in October. So before we go, Giselle, I've got one last question, which is, again, if you wouldn't mind repeating the years for the generations.
Sure, absolutely.
For traditionalists and baby
yeah,
boomers.
Absolutely. So for traditionalists, it's between 1922 and 1945. Between baby boomers is 1946 and 1964. Gen Xers is 1965 to 1980. And Gen Ys is 1981 to 2000.
Wonderful. So again, everyone, for more information, visit us at www.cmcoutperform.com. We're sorry we weren't able to get through all of the questions today, but we will pass them along to Giselle so she has a sense of what kind of information is floating out there so she can include that for future articles or blog posts or tweets that she may be sending out now that she's up and active online. So thank you so much for not only attending today, but for your active participation. It really helps us to get a sense of what you're going through so that we can make sure we're bringing you practical information. So thank you so much for your engagement and attention, and we'll look forward to welcoming you back again and hope to see you for September 5th for our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much.